Line Books present the audiobook of Overpopulation, the Hidden Agenda for Global Reset. Episode 3, The Essence of Innocence. Scene 1, Flashback, Ceremony, 1977. Reuben Segal cleared his throat and introduced Professor Boynton Perfidious, who looked remarkably young, with a full head of dark frizzy hair. The professor took to the lectern and tapped at his microphone. Put-put, it went. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I have been asked to explain, in short, the impact of carbon dioxide upon our environment. You see, when we burn fossil fuel, we release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now this is then absorbed into plants, algae, and certain bacteria through photosynthesis. However, there are those who believe that due to the destruction of our rainforests and the superabundance of fossil fuels being used, that a greenhouse effect is being produced that is causing our planet to warm. Reuben smiled approvingly at the professor, but the professor's eyes said it all. They were rolling with disapproval. However, he began, our planet is over 8 billion years old, and the past 2.5 million years of which have been an ice age, which we called the Quaternary. Now, within this era, every 100,000 years or so, we experience a warming, and the ice cover melts back to the poles. This temporary interglacial period, which we live in today, is known as the Holocene. It lasts for around 11,000 to 12,000 years. As we sit, we are 11,000 years into our present interglacial period, during which time the whole of northern Europe has emerged from ice. We have seen the extinction of the woolly mammoth, the expansion of agriculture, the pyramids, Stonehenge, and the evolution of villages, towns, cities, mechanization, the Industrial Revolution, technology, and the computer age. But this brief summer will not last. Irrespective of any minor changes in atmospheric temperature, in the next 1,000 years or so, the ice will return, and the world we live in today will vanish beneath a mile of ice. Reuben stood quickly and slow-clapped the professor back to his seat. Thank you, Professor. You may sit down now. Thank you. The audience clapped unenthusiastically, most of them confused or bored. What the professor is trying to say is that the world is overheating. Our energy, plants, factories, homes, cars, and planes are pumping out CO2 and screwing with our world. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gotten ourselves a problem that is going to unite the world, that is going to need global governance. I welcome to the stage Charles Banks of DeLonge Modhan, who is going to tell us how we are going to address this. Thank you. Charles Banks walked over to the lectern. He wore a navy blue suit and a red and gold necktie. His hair was immaculate, a glossy horse chestnut, held in place with gel. His chiseled features emanated conviction and erudition. He scanned the room, silently making eye contact with everyone present. The billionaires, the bishops, the barristers, the prime ministers, the professors and philanthropists. He stared them down. The barracudas of the corporate world, religious leaders from Rome, denizens of the academia of Harvard, MIT, and Oxbridge. He spoke softly, demanding their attention. We have tried the despotic rule of kings. the fear of God, the terror of war, and the principle of democratic self-determinism. But they do not work. The greenhouse effect will work. As the globe warms, life will become unbearable, and each and every one of us will be to blame. We all use energy, transport, we all buy things, we all destroy our planet. Every human being is a cost to the survival of this planet. Our first step will be to reduce consumption of energy through taxation. There was a mild approval of tapping of glasses. We will educate the world with the help of FIPA to reduce energy, global warming, and when that fails, we will reduce the population. Few understood the ramifications of what had been said. Most did not care. They were happy to move on to more pressing concerns of the day, such as what should be done about Lady Diana and her campaign against landmines. Scene 2. Digital Consciousness. Banks attended a meeting on the upper floors of Delange Martin. The room was full of young traders in suits and braces, and amongst them was 22, who cut a lonely figure. Banks decided to broach him about what he knew of Proseuticus. Boadicea's husband, I assume you're talking of. I meant the project, said Banks. What project? Banks recognized evasion when he saw it. The speaker, Professor Dina Walton, was a representative of the International Air Transport Association, IATA, and she had come to talk numbers. Air passengers would double to 8.2 billion by 2037, with more than half of the growth coming from the Asian-Pacific region. Hetherington from Legal wanted to know what this might do to the environment. 22 stood and announced that it would never be allowed to happen. The economists were incited to question why, and that led to a discussion on food supply. Our planet is perfectly capable of feeding 25 billion. Not true, asserted 22. This was challenged by funds management, who pointed out that the pharmaceutical companies used poverty and malnutrition to create profit stability in their supply chains. Legal disputed this, insisting that man's track record on poverty speaks for itself. 22 was called on to explain the ripple effect. For every $1 increase at the bottom end of the pay scale, profits for the top 1% fall $277,000. They were urged to consider ways of maintaining a sustainable economy, keeping the poor poor. Hetherington decided to take the rise. Having just serviced my Cessna, I can safely say that I know what it is to be poor. Everyone laughed, except for Henry, who turned his back on the room and looked out of the window over the Thames. This drew silence. He turned around and employed his serious tone. Gentlemen, the population is exploding. He held his hands behind his back. When we rose to power, in the 1770s, the planet served just 700 million. Today is quite a challenge. Implants and rejuvenation surgery by Professor Boynton Perfidius had held Henry's looks in his 60s. He was a good few decades older in reality. He decided not to elaborate. 22 closed the meeting, and Banks was left alone with Henry and 22. Tumblers of whiskey were shared around. We have both read your father's book. Banks began to feel spooked. Philip, do you recall Professor Chen's talk of the worm? Banks thought back to Stonegate and the strange theory of the occipital worm. Well, truth be known, it is not a worm, but a virus. A unique virus. A computer virus, if you will. For once, 22 didn't look so sure. It is infectious and can transmit between people, and like a computer program, it can influence behavior. You created the virus? Asked Banks. Henry and 22 looked at one another. They were both in serious mood, and it was seldom to see them work together, just as it was unusual to see 22 in a suit. He normally preferred to wear his white laboratory coat. Philip, your father wanted to build a virus that could act with free will, that would possess what he termed digital consciousness, something he called Spyron. What we have is a supercomputer that we control here from London, but it is not Spyron. Henry explained. Your father wanted to create a better world, a better place, efficient, reliable. But he needed Spyron to surpass human thinking, if it was to deliver us control. Banks was picking up Orwellian overtones. But something went wrong. What happened? Asked Banks. Our computer closed down for 22 minutes. Ever since, it has not been the same. It is out of control. We need to start again, a new program, which we will have to pass through Genesis, the absorption of the human mind. We attempted this with your father, but he was already too old. Adults have already considered death and other dispiriting phenomena, so they make a poor start. To make our virus pure, we must start with a child. 22 took over. To find the ideal candidate, we have scoured the entire global population. The optimum candidate is a healthy 7-year-old girl, an only child of 2 parents, one male, one female, who are both at least third-generation indigenous to their country, who have not worked abroad, not divorced or married before, and who do not hold religious views or beliefs, who do not work for government or large corporations, who do not display harmful levels of compliance, and who live and work in a rural environment within agriculture or forestry in Finland. Wow, that narrows things down somewhat. There are 3 candidates. What, so from 8 billion people you have whittled it down to 3 7-year-olds in Finland? Yes, confirmed 22. And all you have to do is to decide which one, and bring her back to London. Scene 3. The Curse of Vodkas Kiss. 22 provided Banks with data on each of the 3 girls and their families. Great detail was contained. Everything from school reports, lists of friends, regular payments, health records, etc. Each girl lived in a different part of Finland. Patsy lived in Kumo, near the Russian border. Twain lived in Finnish Lake District in the centre of Finland, and Olivia lived in the southwest tip of Finland near the Baltic Sea. Banks researched online, zooming into their homes and spying on them via home devices, which had been hacked into by the DM's surveillance department. He had been told that he could not let them know anything of the plan, or anything that might alarm the girl. They must leave Finland without suspecting anything underhand. Because the Spyron project was classified, Banks flew to Helsinki alone. The Helsinki night air was chilly, making the heated interior of the Radisson Blu Plaza all that more welcoming. He spent his first night familiarizing himself with the girls through social media and public cameras, cross-referred to facial recognition that had been hacked into by surveillance. Amongst the information he had been given were credit card bills, loan details, prescriptions, medical records relating to the parents of each girl. Every step of their development from infancy to school had been detailed. Cameras within their home computers, phones, televisions were accessible, providing live audio and visual of family life. Snooping in on their private lives made Banks feel uncomfortable. They seemed like good families. He decided that the invasion of privacy was unnecessary, and by way of penance and for inspiration, decided to take a walk around Helsinki at night. He couldn't just hijack the girl, as her state of mind needed to remain pure. Walking the cold, Spartan streets of Helsinki left him feeling empty. It was a particularly uninspiring, grey city. He stopped at a shop to buy a bottle of Finlandia vodka, then returned to his room. Zara soon entered his thoughts. By way of distraction, he flicked through Finnish television. He found the Finnish language impenetrable, which made him further irritable. He ordered food and chose karikarulat, a cabbage leaf wrapped around meat and spice served in a tomato sauce, and a side dish of perunamusi, mashed potato. Once delivered, he broke the seal to his vodka and settled in for the night. In the morning, he checked into each home. All he could hear was muffled Finnish being spoken over music or noise of the television. He took a taxi to the airport and flew north to Jarlsvall, where he picked up a car and drove 30 or so miles to Patsy's home. From a parked position outside her home, he observed, in hope of inspiration. Her home was unremarkable, detached, neat and dull wooden cladding, pale yellow features and a grey-tiled roof. Her home was surrounded by a generous amount of flat land, dotted with tall, thin trees. Like the neighbours, they had no walls or hedges, creating a sense of openness and community. It was hard to fault. Being after lunch, he drove down to her school and parked. As the end of school day approached, a small cluster of saloons and four-wheel drives parked alongside him. He watched the dozen or so children emerge from what was a small building. It wasn't hard to recognize Patsy. She walked arm in arm with another girl, laughing and talking. They said their goodbyes and climbed into separate cars. Banks watched the car drive off and became disillusioned. He had hoped that seeing the girl might help him formulate some plan. It had not. He flew back to Helsinki and retired to his room at the Radisson Blu Plaza with a serving of hörnekito, or pea soup, and broke into the remaining half of his vodka. He viewed the girls in each home. Patsy's was quiet, with just a whooshing noise of closing doors and moving people. Twain's home was the noisiest, with music playing constantly. He stared through the triple glazing at the black night, noting all the aspects that differed from the UK. Empty car parks, neat flats, curb-free roads, quiet cities surrounded by monocultured forests, and endless empty space. A world away from the throning masses of London. The only warmth he could find in Finland was in the curse of Vodkas Kiss. For no other reason than it was there, he visited the hotel sauna, which was empty. He sat alone on the wooden bench, doused the charcoal with water from a wooden spoon, and watched the needle on the gauge glide towards 90 Celsius. Sweat poured from his body. He was in good shape, though he didn't get to the gym as much as he used to, and when he did, he was fond of working out with a punch bag. I could offer them a holiday in London, he thought. But why? And would they want to go to London? Finns seem content in their world, dull as it is. He left the sauna and showered. The need for solution was pressing. Genesis had to take place soon. Back in the hotel bar, Banks sat on a bar stool and ordered vodka, which was served chilled at 3 Celsius, helping to bring out its bouquet. The sweet burn on the back of his throat suited Finland. She may have been as cold and dry as an Arctic fish, but she knew what she was doing when it came to vodka. The young barman watching him had a ginger goatee and scruffy hair. His placid demeanour annoyed Banks, so he went outside. It was cooler than anticipated. His breath made clouds as he exhaled, Soon his ears and nose were tingling. He felt isolated, as one does in an unfamiliar city when alone. No one approached him. His fingers were freezing, and he suddenly had déjà vu. Scene 4. Yet what I can give him, give my heart. It was midwinter and snowing. The tombstone lay on its side, vandalized. Moonlight filtered through the barren trees, casting his breath into a cloud of white. His toes sank into the sodden earth as he crouched to scrape at the moss. The first letter appeared, M. It was freezing cold. He blew on his fingers, and an owl swooped overhead, causing him to jerk nervously. It was then that his phone sent a green strobe over the surface of the snow. He ignored it and carried on, raking at the headstone. His father's epitaph was soon revealed. Here lies the body of Charles Nelson Banks, the monster who wrote The Final Solution. Zara's witness. I saw him collapse. Without thought, I ran across the cemetery, making fresh tracks in the snow to where he lay. Crouched by his side, I saw hot tears drip onto the snow. He never looked up or made a sound. His whole body was straining, and he held his head in his hands as though he were ashamed. I wanted to tell him not to feel so wretched, that it was all right to let it out. I had never seen him so distraught, so emotional. I threw my arms around him and felt the tension in his body as it juddered uncontrollably. I wanted so very much to share his pain, to tell him that it was all right to cry. But he was a ball of suffering and would not unravel. So I brought my face to his big frozen fingers. They were like ice. And I kissed them tenderly, with all my love and with all I had to give. Suddenly, he released and turned to face me. His eyes were red, and there was a powerful anger in his expression, and he said, "If I were a wise man, I would do my part." I didn't realize then that they were lines his father had taught him.